In recent times, security, or, more accurately, the lack of it, has been one of the most prominent items on the news agenda in Nigeria. Hardly a week goes by without a report of a terrorist attack or cases of kidnapping for ransom being reported in the media. Hundreds of civilians and members of the security forces have been killed. Heightened violence and insecurity in the northwest and north-central regions of Nigeria has become an existential threat to many. Reported security incident trends show the regions experienced 65% of the total security incidents in Nigeria in the first quarter of 2022, with 2,331 fatalities. Bandits are largely responsible for stoking violence and insecurity in these regions. The incidents have been labeled in various different ways. From terrorist attacks, such as the attack on Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari's convoy in July 2022 and the hijacking of an entire train in March, to targeted ambushes. There have also been multiple attacks on government facilities and churches over the past few years. But whatever name they go by, the terrorists appear to be running free across the Nigerian landscape. To make sense of what is happening in Nigeria, let's look at where it all started, who the perpetrators are, who is at risk, why government strategies have failed, and what the possible solutions are. Banditry in Nigeria emerged as an isolated rural phenomenon in the late 2000s. It's now evolved into sophisticated violent criminality, characterized by syndicates with immense reach across regions and countries. The trend of recent attacks in northern Nigeria suggests it has now become an aggravated threat, driven by a nexus of banditry, arms, drugs, and terrorism. There is evidence of a tacit synergy between terrorist elements and bandits in northern Nigeria, a synergy based on tactical opportunism or pragmatism. In the early 2010s, bandits were largely roving brigands that marauded communities in the hinterlands. They engaged in cattle rustling, highway and market route robbery, localized village raids, and mercenary militancy. By the late 2010s, they had developed into organized tribes of semi-sedentary criminals that maintained pockets of underworld fiefdoms. Currently, bandits operate in many states of northwestern and north-central Nigeria. The critical hotbeds are Zamfara, Katsina, Kebbi, Kaduna, Sokoto, Nasarawa, and Niger. The Kaduna-Katsina-Zamfara axis, with its epicenter at the Byron and Gwari area, has been particularly deadly in terms of fatal incidents. At some point in the evolution of the violent gangs ravaging Nigeria, bandits and terrorists started being called unknown gunmen. The label was wrong and misleading. The atrocities and motivation of bandits had assumed insurgent-type criminality, and the Nigerian government's reluctance to call them terrorists or insurgents was unhealthy. Eventually, a court order forced the government's hand, and the terrorist label got stickier. Nigeria now ranks among the kidnapping hotspots of the world. Over 3,000 people were kidnapped in Nigeria in the first half of 2021 alone. The figure for January 2022 has been reported as 571. This practice has evolved among the bandits and terrorists of northern Nigeria, militants and cultists in the Niger Delta, as well as the ritual killers of the western and eastern parts of the country. Nigeria's banditry crisis is a complicated situation with a number of interests, motives, and actors. Some criminals are opportunistic, others organized. Militants, terrorists, and insurgents use banditry to raise funds for their operations and as a bargaining strategy. Kidnapping for ransom thrives in Nigeria because the material incentive and opportunity are there, and victims find it expedient to pay the ransom. Since 2016, the current government has adopted numerous military and other non-military strategies to stamp out banditry. But the increasing activity and violence of the groups indicate that the government's efforts have failed to achieve the desired results. In the early stages of banditry in 2016, some Nigerian state governments leaned heavily on negotiation and settlement to end it. Zamfara, Katsina, Sokoto, and Kaduna states adopted different dialogue and settlement initiatives to end the killings, banditry, and kidnappings. The state governments paid money as compensation to identified bandits in return for peace. Sokoto, Zamfara, and Katsina states further offered an amnesty hinged on renouncing banditry and kidnapping and the surrender of weapons. Overall, the dialogue, settlement, and peace mission failed to end the banditry. But it did reveal that the groups were mainly driven by economic motivations. As negotiations and settlements failed, in 2018, government efforts turned to military aerial bombardment of occupied forests used as bandit strongholds. The effort was strengthened by the seizure of telecommunication services in parts of the Northwest for several weeks in the last quarter of 2021. Seizing the network was meant to undermine the ability of the groups to communicate and receive information about military activities. The operation did not weaken the groups. The crisis worsened, and civilian casualties resulted from military air raids in 2021 in several communities. State governments decided, in 2020, not to negotiate with bandits. They also discouraged victims' families from paying ransom to bandits in exchange for their kidnapped family members. The Nigerian Senate considered passing the Terrorism Prevention Amendment, Bill 2021. This would criminalize the payment of ransom as a felony punishable by up to 15 years in prison. The intention was to make kidnapping for ransom less attractive. But the bill attracted public criticism. Successful rescue of victims by security forces would have discouraged Nigerians from paying ransom, but such rescues have been insignificant. Citizens are therefore not confident that if they do not pay ransom, their kidnapped family members will be freed through security operations. It is unclear whether the bill will be approved by the Senate after the public debates. Furthermore, a federal high court ruling has compelled the federal government to proscribe bandits as terrorist organizations. This was intended to ensure that the appropriate level of force, tactical and operational assets, and resources were deployed against the groups. In essence, this should translate into tougher sanctions for the bandits and the application of the Terrorism Prevention Act to penalize their informants and supporters. Yet these measures have not deterred the terror groups that are now sanctioned. Poverty, hunger, and unemployment make people vulnerable to radicalization and drive conflict. What is required is sincere policy implementation to lift Nigerians out of these circumstances. In the short term, improved security collaboration with civilians would make individuals and communities feel safer and more willing to offer vital information to security forces. Trust in government security forces is lacking in Nigeria. There have been cases of violent extremist organizations infiltrating villages in retaliation for their cooperation with government security agencies. Government forces therefore need to keep their sources of information confidential. They must also prove themselves capable of finding and rescuing kidnapped victims so that a ransom doesn't have to be paid. Thanks for watching. If you like this type of content, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more stories.